guys, how are we doing today? Steve Mingleco here, and today's video we're basically going to be covering why do so many programmers lose hope? Why do so many programmers end up quitting or finding out that this isn't a field they want to be in once they get into it? And ultimately there's several different reasons why most programmers end up quitting. I mean, basically, there's very few programmers who will ever get to a level of programming where they're basically retiring and finishing their whole careers in the field of programming. And basically, it comes down to several different factors. And I would say that the first one is just the learning curve. Technology is always changing, things are always advancing, and it's never really staying the same. So if you're going to be in programming for 20, 30, 40 years, you really have to continue to evolve with the programs, with the languages, with the technology. And that can be overwhelming. I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed, even in the last 10 years that I've been programming, that we didn't start with and that were never around 10 years ago, and now they're almost a mandatory type skill to have. And that can be overwhelming. It can really take its toll on you when you have to not only work but continue to learn new technology and new skills all the time that you're not necessarily being upfront paid for, if that makes sense. Yes, you can obviously learn a lot of the skills and stuff on the job while you're working, but at the same time, it is something that you're continually needing to learn, and that can often be overwhelming, which goes into the second point, which is just changing technology. As I said, things 10 years ago there weren't mobile phones, there weren't tablets, all these things that now have become so popular, and I think a big reason that people leave is because they just can't keep up with the changing technology. So 1 and 2 are pretty similar in the technology, in the changing languages, in the learning curve. But going into number 3 is often when you get into these positions and these companies, there is a lack of understanding between the management and yourself, or the product marketers, the other people on the team that are just not in the coding element of it. And often when they start to tell you how things should be done, or when things should be done, or what's not working, and it's not like a positive feedback, that can be stressful. And it can be so stressful that people will just quit or leave or not pursue anymore, because a lot of time that feedback, the other side of the business doesn't understand all the code in the back. They might see it from the front end, but they're not in there every day learning and experiencing what's going on in the back of the system. So when you're being told how things should be done on a constant daily basis, or when you're being told that you're not doing things the correct way, it can be overwhelming. And there's a lot of times that I've actually lost drive working on a project for people or with people because of how they've approached the understanding of what is all entailed to be done. And I would kind of bring that into the fourth point, which would just be like timelines and structures. Because again, a lot of these projects are based on a certain amount of time frames of what's being done, but then at the end of the day, it's very hard to often meet those timelines, especially if you're not the one who set them. If somebody in management or if somebody in the company set those timelines and they're just not reasonable, oops, sorry for that, from a development standpoint, that can be very overwhelming for people. And it's often ended up that people go into what the fifth point would be, and it's just being burnt out. And it's easy to get burnt out in this field because there are so many things that, as we just went over, that start to egg you on. And don't get me wrong, every career has their positives and their negatives. It's just that with technology and with programming, often people do not understand where you're at, because they're hiring you for your skills of programming and coding because they can't do it. And that lack of understanding between you and the business can often lead to burnout and just feeling like, it goes into my sixth and final point, which is just feeling helpless. Feeling like there's really no reason to continue getting up and going to a position or job where you feel like you're not able to meet the expectations. A lot of times I know companies that have cut out testing, companies that have cut out time for, design and development and functionality and features that should be there if you had a little more time to kind of work yourself through the system. Because a lot of times as you're building these things are coming at you that weren't expected originally, that then become almost like expected, and it's very, very overwhelming, and it can often feel like a bit of being just helpless in your position. But even with those things being said, you have to understand that, again, every job does have its positives and negatives, and there's a lot of benefits of being in programming. You have a lot of flexibility. It's normally very good money. So there are those benefits, but there's so many programmers who ultimately do not make it through or quit or go into another field just because of these reasons listed. So I'm just going to quickly go back through what they are. I mean, number one is basically just the learning curve and the difficulty of knowing all these languages, programs, softwares, computer skills in general. Number two would be kind of just covering the difference of changing technologies. What's here today won't necessarily be here tomorrow, and you're going to need to continue to evolve and learn and get those skills. Otherwise, you will be left out in the past, and you won't be able to continue to grow in this field for another 20, 30 years. The third is just the disconnect between the development and the business structure in general. Being told how to do things, being told what's right and wrong. This can often lead to just a sense of burnout and helplessness, which are basically the final points. And you have to be able to understand that that's going to happen, and you have to understand how you're going to make sure that it doesn't stop you from moving forward in life. Because again, this is overall a very good job with a bright future and a skill set that is just in high demand. So with all of that being said, don't give up. Continue to push forward, and you should have a good career. If you guys have any other questions about how to stay going with coding and programming, let me know in the comments. We'd be happy to help you, and we'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care.